Okay, so folks, apparently we're having some trouble with the live streaming, so we'll be recording this meeting so that we can post it on the website after the fact. So thank you for being here for the Affordable Housing Strategy Implementation Committee for Tuesday, March the 5th. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before we start our meeting today, I do have some sad news to share, and I suspect that most of you know this already. But a couple of days ago, one of our members of this committee, Ali Esmail, passed away unexpectedly, and we are very, very, very sad to hear that news. I just wanted to read a little statement that we've prepared to about this. On behalf of myself, members of council, and members of this committee, of course, and the city of Richmond Hill, we wish to extend our heartfelt condolences to the family, loved ones, and community members grieving the solemn occasion of the passing of Mr. Ali Esmail. I was deeply saddened to hear of the loss of such a respected community member. His death will leave a tremendous void both in the Ismaili community and the advocacy for affordable housing. Mr. Ali Esmail had a long-standing relationship with the city of Richmond Hill. He cared deeply for our Richmond Hill community and worked tirelessly to make a difference, volunteering in support of affordable housing issues for the past 30 years. In 1990, Mr. Esmail founded the Jubilee Garden Not-for-Profit Housing Corporation and built a 100 townhouse nonprofit housing project in Richmond Hill. More recently, he shared his knowledge and expertise on this committee as a respected member of the Richmond Hill Affordable Housing Implementation Committee. In addition to his selfless work as it relates to affordable housing, Mr. Esmail was a long-standing volunteer, having served for many years as the director, United Way of York Region, on the Board of Governors of the North York General Hospital Foundation, and as a member of the Human Services Planning Coalition of York Region. His contributions to furthering the social change and creating affordable housing in our city will be a legacy that he has given all of us. We want to very sincerely express our condolences to his family and to all his colleagues and to the many, many friends that I've heard from in the last few days that have reached out about this. So anyway, we're very sorry to hear about that, and Ali will certainly be missed on this committee as well. So, okay, having said that, I would need a motion at this time to adopt the agenda. Okay, Member Guinness, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Okay, seeing none. Okay, we need to adopt the previous minutes, and we have one Affordable Housing Implementation Committee that was held on October the 17th. I need a motion to adopt those minutes. Okay, Kathleen, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Okay, so our scheduled business today, we have a presentation by Sarah Cameron on the York Region update regarding the Affordable Private Market Housing Implementation Plan. And I think to start that off, we're going to have Director Maria Flores introduce us and get us started. So over to you, Director Flores.
Thank you, Mayor West. Good afternoon, committee members. I would like to take a moment to introduce you actually to our new manager of policy, Phoebe Chow. She's joining us here today. Phoebe is actually a returning alumni of Richmond Hill. She previously worked for the city, actually back when it was a town, for about 10 years in development planning, before going to work for York Region and more recently at the town of Newmarket. She's now come full circle back to Richmond Hill to lead us in the official plan update and other land use planning policy initiatives, as well as to oversee many of the city's affordable housing initiatives. So welcome back, Phoebe. I don't know if the slides are up yet, but anyway, I'll speak to the meeting agenda really quickly. For today's agenda, we do have two sets of updates. The first is an update from York Region. So I would like to introduce Sarah Cameron, who you can also see on your screen. She is a senior planner at York Region. Sarah oversees the long-range planning housing portfolio at the region, and she's here today to tell us about York Region's affordable private market housing implementation plan. Following the region's update, we will also have an update from our staff on Richmond Hill's initiatives, and that will be presented by Chun Chu, our senior planner here in the policy section. So I will now hand it over to Sarah to walk us through her presentation.
Fantastic.
Okay, welcome,
Thank
Sarah.
You,
over to you.
Thank you, Mayor West. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today and making room in your schedules to discuss private market housing affordability, a subject near and dear to my heart. As Maria mentioned, my name is Sarah Cameron, and I am the staff lead on a project to determine how the region can best support private market affordability. This project is called the Affordable Private Market Housing Implementation Plan, which you will hear me refer to as the AHIP. Next slide, please. So for today's meeting, we're going to focus on the AHIP overall. We have retained N. Barry Lyon Consultants, or NBLC, to help us along with this work. And in the fall of last year, NBLC provided us with an updated housing needs analysis. I will share some of the key findings with you. Most recently, NBLC has identified a list of potential approaches to address affordability for feedback as we work to draft the proposed AHIP. Today, I'm going to step through the list of approaches with you, and my main objective is to get your feedback on the approaches and ask you to help me find my blind spots. What are we missing? At this point, the intent is to be considering and getting input on all options. No directions are being specifically recommended. And I'll close off our session with a discussion and an overview of next steps. And next slide. So this graphic here represents the housing system in York Region and really throughout Ontario. There's three main segments to the housing system, and the region has a role in each of them. Our community and health services teams address the first two segments, that being the homelessness segment, which focuses on people that do not currently have permanent shelter, and it includes both emergency and transitional housing. And then there's the community housing segment, which focuses on nonprofit and cooperative housing. That includes Housing York Inc. The final segment, focusing on the private market, is a partnership effort with planning taking the lead. This segment, highlighted in blue on the screen, focuses on all market housing, including both rental and ownership, and is the focus of the AHIP and the NBLC work being discussed today. Once the work identifying approaches to meet housing needs and needs of those within each of the three housing segments is complete, we will collectively use that information to inform the region's next 10-year housing and homelessness plan. So this is the objective of the AHIP. We want to identify actions, advocacy, and partnership approaches York Region should be pursuing to address private market housing gaps in the short, medium, and long term. There's a couple of things to note here. Not all approaches to address housing need are the responsibility of the region. Partnerships and advocacy efforts are going to be required. This is really important to emphasize. Housing needs to be addressed by all levels of government and community partners. No one agency can or should be addressing these issues on their own, and all parties need to come to the table with meaningful actions. Also, not all approaches will be appropriate for York Region in the short term. We will focus on what we should be doing, and we'll spread it over the short, mid, and long terms. Next slide. So this is the process that we're taking to develop the AHIP. And in order to get to our final recommended solutions, we're engaged in a three-step process. Last fall, NBLC provided an updated housing needs analysis to the York Region Housing Affordability Task Force based on updated data to help identify gaps in our housing system. I'll be going over key findings from that report over the next couple of slides. Most recently, NBLC has provided the task force with a list of potential approaches that we are going to go over today. The feedback that we receive on potential approaches will help us identify final recommended solutions to be included in the proposed AHIP to be delivered to our council later this year. Next slide. These are the key findings from the housing needs analysis. I don't think many of them will be surprising to this group. York Region has very little purpose-built rental housing, and market rate rental housing development has been stagnant in recent decades. Despite the lack of purpose-built rental investment, renter households have accounted for over half of household growth in York Region since 2016. Not surprisingly, rental rates are increasing rapidly, with most apartment options exceeding $2,000 per month and ground-related rentals exceeding $3,000 per month. The most pressing need in York Region is to address the needs of renter households across a variety of incomes and characteristics. There is also a very real lack of affordable ownership housing. This disproportionately impacts first-time home buyers and, in turn, our ability to grow. There is a need for greater and more diverse supply of housing to support our growth and economic aspirations. Next slide. So this slide here is really a summary of the housing needs analysis and shows access to housing in the region based on income. The chart identifies what housing types regional residents can afford by income decile and provides a simplified but comprehensive summary of need. At the bottom of the chart are the maximum incomes and house prices and rents for each decile. The vertical axis highlights, from a general standpoint, the type of housing and tenure available to each decile. To assist in interpreting the chart, I'll direct your attention to a few areas. At the far right, those households earning incomes at the 10th decile can afford all unit types and tenures being provided within the region. They are fully within the blue affordable area. Looking now to the middle of the chart, households with incomes at the 5th, 6th, and even 7th deciles are priced out of the ownership market, but can afford a variety of rental options. The lowest earning households have few or no market options available to them in the current housing climate. What the chart tells us is that households up to and including those in the 8th decile are increasingly relying on the rental market for housing. Next slide. As you know, house prices and affordability challenges impact Richmond Hill profoundly. In 2022, Richmond Hill had the second highest average resale price in York Region at more than $1.46 million, and that had grown by 120% over 10 years. Richmond Hill does have the most purpose-built rental units in York Region, but the total supply is still quite limited, and given the size of the population, continued focus on that area is likely needed. Despite the limited purpose-built rental supply, rental households accounted for nearly 75% of household growth in Richmond Hill since 2016. So the question becomes, what are we going to do? And next slide, please. And that brings us to the second step of the AHIP, which was to identify all the potential approaches the region could be taking to address affordability in the private market. So this is the full laundry list of approaches. And the potential approaches have been categorized as you see on the screen. Financial options provide direct financial intervention to get more below market housing built. Under this category, we find direct actions that the region can take. Coordination and partnership initiatives outline opportunities for the region to take a coordination role and reduce administrative financial burden for local municipalities. And finally, advocacy initiatives acknowledge that more is needed from upper levels of government to solve the housing crisis, and that municipalities cannot solve these issues on their own. Over the next few slides, I'm going to provide you with more detail on the purpose of each of these types of actions and the potential approaches NBLC advises we could consider for each one. Next slide, please. So our financial approaches, they reduce the cost of development for housing providers who are seeking to build the types of housing that are identified as a priority. So that's primarily purpose-built rental housing. These programs, they increasingly are targeting both low and moderate income housing. So they are being used in the private market in adjacent municipalities. And for these programs to work, quite often partnerships and coordination with other levels of government is required so we can layer the incentives in order to make the pro formas pencil. Because there's really no business case for private sector to build below market housing. So financial incentives will help make targeted developments more viable. They're voluntary, and they require an adequate budget to succeed. Next slide, please. So this is the list that NBLC has identified for financial approaches. At the regional level, the financial levers we really have to do with property taxes, development charges, and we have an ability to provide capital grants. Currently, we have development charge deferrals in place for purpose-built rental developments. They range from 3 to 20 years, dependent on the size and location of the development. So we could definitely look at bolstering those development incentives, including the use of public land for affordable housing. Item number 3 has to do with units that could be secured by local municipalities through various planning processes, including inclusionary zoning. What we find currently is those mechanisms that allow local municipalities to require affordability. They do not allow the local municipalities to require the depth of affordability that we serve off of our centralized wait list. So there's a gap there. There's an administrative gap there. And there may be room for us to investigate approaches to close that gap. There's thought around additional dwelling unit programs. And I had mentioned off the top property taxes. To make all of this work, there needs to be an enhanced and predictable funding stream put in place, which is increasingly challenging to do. Next slide, please. So we look to our adjacent municipalities. Our both Peel and Durham regions are currently offering an annual competitive capital grant to developers building priority housing. Both programs are similar to what the region is currently offering for nonprofit developers, but is expanded so that private developers building moderately affordable housing could also qualify. So we'll be taking a hard look at this program as at these two programs as we move forward. And next slide, please. So coordination and partnership approaches include opportunities for the region to provide coordination of municipal policy and process reforms. The benefits to this coordination include efficiency, reduced administrative burden, and reduced costs. And there's a number of examples where NBLC thinks the region may play a role, and I've listed those over the next 3 slides. I'm going to move through these fairly quickly so that there's lots of time for discussion at the end, but I'm happy to come back and discuss any of them further at the end if you'd like me to do so. So next slide, please. So the top 3 suggestions on this slide, they're highly interrelated and they all focus on changes to planning and policy processes needed to increase and diversify our housing supply. And there's room where the region could provide best practices and coordination roles around supporting planning reform to create more or broader housing supply, supporting local municipalities to simplify the development process and fast-track priority projects, and also supporting local municipalities to simplify zoning to improve clarity and predictability. There's also room where the region, if local municipalities signaled that this was useful. When inclusionary zoning is pursued by local municipalities, there's quite a bit of background work that needs to be done. It can be quite challenging to keep that background work current because housing data and the housing environment is shifting so quickly. The region could play a centralized role in doing some of that background work for inclusionary zoning. And finally, we currently have a sort of concierge program for nonprofit developers that we're very astute with connecting them with partners and programs. And we would want to expand that and make sure that we're able to offer the same service to the private market. Next slide, please. Lots of talk about pre-approved building designs. Certainly the region could play a role in that. We're kind of sitting tight right now. The federal government has signaled that they are also interested in pursuing this. So we're keeping an eye on that for the time being. Together with local municipalities, we want to continue to shift the public discourse around growth, density, and affordable housing, and kind of collectively push back on the NIMBY mentality. With purpose-built rental, it's really the golden goose for housing these days in your region, to increase our supply. We also want to eye on attrition and eye out the back end. So we could certainly be working with local municipalities across the region to explore standard rental replacement bylaws, and how they might work and be able to provide tools around best practices and so forth. There's also opportunities around tools to increase available housing supply and providing centralized resources on short-term rentals. Next slide, please. There's lots of non-traditional construction techniques, housing tenures, and funding models that are emerging. So this can include things like modular construction, tiny homes, container housing, panelization, timber, and so forth. It can also include tenures and funding models like land leases, life leases, second mortgages, reverse mortgages, rent to own, and so forth. The region can play a role in supporting these new approaches to affordability, again, by providing a centralized resource to local municipalities. We want to formalize and continue partnering with other agencies, think tanks, academia, and so forth as we explore solutions. Again, back to tax policy and ongoing discussions on best approaches to tax policy and property taxation. And finally, this one is near and dear to my heart. I think that collectively, all levels of government can do better at ensuring housing is co-located with new public and community facilities. And I think the region can take a lead on again, centralized resources and best practices on how to get there. Okay, and next slide, please. So this brings us to our third bucket of approaches, and that's advocacy approaches. More active participation from the provincial and federal governments will be required to have a more significant and lasting impact on housing affordability, particularly when it comes to subsidizing new affordable housing development. There is only so much we can do off of the property tax base, is what it comes down to. So there's 2 slides with advocacy approaches. If we go to the next slide, please. Yes, thank you. Most of these have to do with funding, as you may imagine, whether that's increasing direct funding for specific projects or broadening existing funding and financing programs to ensure maximum benefit throughout them. We would like to see lower cost financing for new purpose-built rental development. There are programs in place. We think they can be even better. We need in Canada, Ontario, the GTA, York Region, and Richmond Hill, we need more purpose-built rental development. In order to get there, reliance on municipalities to find these solutions will drive a need for more revenue tools than what we currently have in the lack of senior government funding. Another key piece, of course, is labor supply, and we will have we can advocate ongoing for increased labor supply and maximizing the labor supply that we do have for building housing. Next slide, please. The targeted funding, the previous slide, we spoke to targeted funding for specific projects. That targeted funding could actually go beyond that when we're talking about getting housing units in the ground, and it may also speak to some of the administrative costs and or the enabling infrastructure. As I've mentioned, our biggest lever for revenue is property tax. So we may have some advocacy pieces going forward for more progressive property taxation, for permissions to have more progressive property taxation. Tenant protections are an ongoing issue that has to do with both reducing rent evictions of vulnerable households. And it also may, there may be some room for adjustments to provincial rent control policies that may be worth consideration. Would like to see funding aligned with population and growth targets. And as we work to streamline our own development approvals, we would like to see the same happen at the provincial and federal levels. And as we work towards all of this, both the region and Richmond Hill have lots of friends out there in the housing world, and we will continue to collaborate and use collective power of municipalities for any of these items. If we could go to the next slide, please. These are the next steps for the AHIP. So we're kind of thick into consultation right now, and over the next few months, we'll continue undertaking targeted and public consultation. We're currently targeting Q2 to present our preferred directions to our Housing Affordability Task Force. Based on the feedback that we received from our task force on those preferred directions, we will follow up in September with a proposed AHIP. And the proposed AHIP, as I said at the beginning, that will be brought forward with documents that speak to the other housing segments, the Community Housing Master Plan and the Homelessness System Service Plan. And we will then wrap all three of those plans together, and they will fall under the umbrella of our housing and homelessness plan. And with that, if we could go to the next slide. These are the key questions that I would like to start with. If anyone has input, but I would also be open to anything else anyone else has to say. I always love to talk housing. I'm sorry, my screens are a little bonkers on me right now. If someone were able to put these questions into the chat, maybe we could go back to full screen.
Okay. Maybe what we'll do here is, thank you very much, Sarah. Sorry, to start with. That's a great presentation, lots and lots going on. And frankly, and I think in order for us to even make a significant dent in this problem, lots and lots of things are going to have to happen all at the same time with many, actors acting in pulling in the same direction at the same time too. So what I would recommend, let's open up the floor to members of the committee. And we also have Councillor Davidson here and Councillor Silovitz live and in person, and Councillor Shu and Thompson are also here online. So they may have some questions as well, of course, as the members of the committee. So we're all free at this point to weigh in, but I'd like the first person that would like to speak, if they could move the motion to receive this presentation as well, that would be great. Who would like to get us kicked off? Okay, Kathy and then Cheryl and then Regional Local Councillor DePaulo. Go ahead, Kathleen. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very in-depth presentation. A number of things have gone through my mind and I have many questions. So I guess I'm just sort of confined to one question.
No, you got 5 minutes, Kathy. So go ahead and do, whatever you can in that time.
Well, first of all, what jumps out at me, like we talk about financial incentives. The 31.1 million of the Housing Accelerator Fund, is any of that money going to go into incentives or to develop, say, purpose-built rentals, etc.?
I'll take that, given that it's Richmond Hill. Just very on a high level, we are finalizing the criteria that we're going to use and the specifics on how we're going to be using and leveraging that money to make sure that, a lot of these good things are going to happen. So we are working on it and, we should be able to release all the details as to what specifically we're going to be doing fairly shortly.
Okay, just a follow-up question. You talked about bylaw reform and parking reform. I'm thinking that it's my sense that the bylaws are getting in the way of development. So is there an initiative or an incentive to start looking at these bylaws that are sort of holding people up? Like parking, I know in Hamilton, 2 supportive housing developments were stalled because of parking, because they had a parking lot there. So what is the attitude here in Richmond Hill, say, towards parking?
Sarah, I'm not sure that that's something that you want to tackle. If not, we have members of our planning team here as well.
Maybe I could get started and then I could pass it over to Richmond Hill Planning after that. I just want to cycle back with the financial incentives through the HAF program. The York region was not eligible to apply for the HAF program. So we will not be providing any incentives with money received from that program because we will not be receiving any. But each local municipality will have an opportunity to explore what they may be able to do. As far as bylaw and parking reform goes, at the regional scale, we don't have zoning bylaws. That's a local municipal scale again. What my general sense is local municipalities are working very quickly and diligently to look at their zoning bylaws, by and large, is what my sense is. In all fairness, and this is from speaking outside the box, so somebody from the city may correct me. Prior to COVID, people would have been screaming for local municipal heads if they were to talk about opening up the yellow belt, about these increased densities. It's only today that we're really gaining this understanding and being asked to react in this way. Would be my comment on that, and let me turn it over. And I actually don't know the status, I'm afraid, at Richmond Hill, so I'll turn it over to planning staff.
Chun, if you want to weigh in on that.
Yes, please. Kathleen, thank you for your question. With regards to parking, we do understand that parking does affect the cost of construction. And so the city is presently working on a parking strategy, but it is a strategy that is not only looking at affordable housing, but in terms of, where that modal split is going to go as the city continues to urbanize. As you are aware, we do have Yonge Street, which is the BRT corridor. We have the subway that's coming up to the city. We have Highway 7. And so we do have these regional corridors with transit investment. And as the transit investment is being implemented over time, we hope that the modal split would change over time so that more people would be looking at alternative ways of traveling, not only relying specifically on vehicle. And so the city is presently developing this parking strategy. I think it's supposed to be done either this year or next year, but it is in the process. And as we develop that strategy, we are also looking at reduced parking for affordable housing projects. So yes, we are reviewing that.
Okay, that's great. May I have another question?
Absolutely.
What about skinny homes? Like, I'm aware of a video that came from the city of Edmonton. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but there they put up two skinny homes on one lot. You know, there's all sorts of innovative ways in which to increase housing in the land that we already have, like putting up fourplexes, you know, or I mean, there's all sorts of innovative ways. I've been in touch with friends across Canada, and I got some ideas from Halifax. So I'd like to share that, maybe send it in to the planning department, because I mean, I think in Canada, we're experiencing a housing crisis, and I think we all have to get together and pool the information that we have, what works.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, well, thank you very much. The next speaker that we have is Cheryl Guinness.
Good afternoon, everyone. Through you, Mr. Chair. Sarah, there is something I noticed, and I just needed some clarity. You made an emphasis of affordable private market. Why the word private? Help me understand that.
Absolutely, Cheryl. So it really goes back to that first graphic that I showed with the three different types of the three housing segments.
Mm-hmm.
The middle segment is the community housing segment. And that the distinction between the private market and that segment is that there are huge funding streams from senior levels of government that are used to build community housing. What we're trying to do through the AHIP is to use less revenue to influence the private market rather than to do the direct builds ourselves, in order just to help alleviate some of the affordability pressures just above the community housing segment. So that's why the emphasis is on private market. It's not that the public housing, it's not that community housing is being ignored. It's that it falls into a different bucket, and the approaches that we will use to bolster that supply will be different than what we use in the private market.
Okay, so you're saying this will be more private builders that you will be working with specifically? Is that what you're saying? Not nonprofit or that sort?
That's correct. For this plan, primarily private.
Okay. I do have another question. Thank you so much. One of the areas you spoke about advocating, and I looked at the numbers when you were speaking about being able to afford rent, and you're looking at the high income earners and you're saying they're looking more at the rental market. Are we thinking about advocating to the government about changing the stress tests in that sense? Because instead of them renting, they would be able to buy, which will put less stress on the rental market.
Ownership is definitely on our the degree of affordability challenges in York Region in the ownership market makes it extremely challenging to bridge the gap. Absolutely advocacy in areas that will help increase ownership affordability. Absolutely something that we will be considering.
Okay. I look forward to
But I just want to preface it with I really don't think adjustments to the stress tests would be a silver bullet. It would just be one plank. It would just be one piece.
like everything else, trying to
Right.
work through the affordable strategy. There's
Yes.
many pieces that we have to work with to make this
Absolutely.
successful, right? Okay, so and to answer to one of your question, I think you were saying if there is a missing type of property. So I will echo Kathleen and said yes, the smaller units, we will love to see more of that if we can do some of that. And the generational units will be important. Okay, and that's all for me now.
Okay, thanks so
Thank
much,
you so
Cheryl.
much.
The next one's Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, want to have some input. I really like the presentation. I like the approach. I like the where we're going. It's nice to know we have a plan and we're working forward. You just had a few questions on that last slide. The number one question was what's the most important or the best kind of new housing to have, and to me, it's purpose-built rental. I think that's what we need, and it's really encouraging because we've got some applicants coming forward now with purpose-built rental on Yonge Street. We're in an ideal position, really, to begin to provide that type of housing because what we're being told is that the market has changed. That whereas purpose-built housing in the past was not an economical venture to that today it is with the rental prices the way as they are, and that they do need some help from municipalities because of the time it takes to carry and fund the project and the amount of investment that you're not getting the return like you would with a condo immediately on completion or with significant deposits during construction. So we need the bigger players that are looking for the longer term to make smaller returns, but in a very stable type of investment. And I think we're fortunate at Richmond Hill. We've got entities like OMERS, huge pension funds that are looking to build on Yonge Street. So it's promising, but it's going to take a while, and this is a crisis situation, and we need to address things right now. I don't think the multi-unit changes that the province has introduced it's a drop in the bucket. I don't think it's going to address the problem. I don't think that's going to be the answer. You would have to be wholesale changing neighborhoods, and adding a unit here or there, I don't think is going to be the way to address the overall problem. But what I wanted to ask you, Sarah, is as an expert in the industry, is there any willingness by the provincial or federal government to allow, say, municipalities to, we have a lot of land and we have a lot of money in reserves and it's allocated for certain purposes and we need it, but we could assist in being lenders. We could assist in donating land at a lower than market cost. We could finance at a lower finance rate, and we could partner with, I'm talking about Habitat for Humanity, Blue Door, reputable firms that are out there providing housing, and not to say anything against them, but their number of units per year that everything they do is wonderful, but it's not helping to tackle the problem. But if they were to really partner, like if Richmond Hill was willing, if our council was willing, could we does the province or federal government allow the city to just say, we're going to partner? We're not into make any money. We want to get our money back because it's our taxpayers' money, and we don't need any profit, but we're willing to use and leverage some of the monies we have in reserve to provide more housing, and we're willing to partner with reputable community nonprofit groups to do so. So is there any talk of the province allowing the municipality a little flexibility to do that kind of thing?
So, oh,
Go ahead, Sarah.
Loaded question, sorry.
thank you. There was a lot there. I absolutely agree. I'm seeing the numbers on the purpose-built rental. There's movement in that area that we haven't seen in decades, and a lot of that movement is in Richmond Hill. It seems to be a prime time. The province and the feds have removed the HST finally from purpose-built rental. It seems to be penciling. There seems to be more projects coming forward. We're very, very enthusiastic about that, and you're absolutely correct. As far as using municipal land or money, so right now there was a council motion at Regional Council for local municipalities to explore the potential of transferring land to the region in order for us to put it out for housing purposes. So I know that work is being done in a number of municipalities, and that staff are looking. So absolutely, I think that land is a really smart place to be looking. I want to be absolutely clear. We don't have the money. My understanding is York's Housing York Inc. doesn't have the money to build on all of the land. So then we do go to that next step that you were talking about putting it out for tender and partnership efforts and RFPs and criteria and evaluations and so forth like that. So the land piece, absolutely. Absolutely. If there's land in the local municipality that that you think would be good for housing, please reach out and I can connect you with the great people. When it comes to the money, I think you need to have either a CIP or a municipal cap facilities bylaw in place. There's mechanisms that would allow that to happen. And any programs that were developed, as always, I mean, we've always worked very, very closely with Richmond Hill staff at the region. We would work closely together just to align definitions and make sure that any programs created at each level were properly stackable to maximize benefit out of them. These are all fantastic ideas. I love your thinking, Councillor DePaul.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those answers. I have some familiarity with what's happening at Housing New York and their request of municipalities for land, but I still don't think that's going to address the magnitude of the problem. If we're a little bit of land here or there, and in Richmond Hill's case, our land is so expensive, and we want to contribute and we want to donate and do our part, but it's just so expensive for land in Richmond Hill. Anything that we do have, and to me, it's a little bit more irresponsible to just give it away, when if we were just leveraging and trying to break even, like at a break even rate, I think we could put up a ton of affordable housing, not attainable, like meeting the definition, truly getting some product on the market that's affordable, and using the list that Housing York has. So this it's qualified and being offered to those most in need theoretically. So I think we do have all those things in place, and I appreciate your answer. I'm gonna try and investigate this a little more, but it sounds like if we did have some sort of policy that was properly crafted, that was offered, to everyone. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just noticed I'm a little over time. I don't usually talk into the red, but I just want to wrap up. That thank you for your answers. I'm going to maybe follow up with you offline or continue to ask these questions, because I was so encouraged by what Blue Door does, and why can't we somehow, finance them or help them to do more of what they do on a break even basis. Governments, and I understand all the problems that went along with subsidized housing in the past, and there's some fear there, but I think we have to get back into it. Thanks anyways. Sorry for going over, Mr. Mayor.
No, that's okay. It'll be the usual 4 lashes with the wet noodle, but we'll do that later. Okay, Gabe DiMartino.
Good afternoon, Mayor West and members of the committee. Gabe DiMartino, I'm the build the development industry representative, and Sarah, thank you for your presentation, very detailed, and just listen to comments and questions. I have a couple as well. The role of Housing New York. My neighbor used to be the deputy finance commissioner in Peel region, and he administered the program there where they would take public land and go out to RFP and do private partnerships. So you mentioned, there's Habitat for Humanity, Blue Door, there's also the REITs out there. You've got GWL, Starlight, these guys do purpose-built rental. I don't know if the region has reached out to them. And I guess the question is, with Housing New York, you've got, this is the city of Richmond Hills housing strategy. The city of Markham has a housing strategy. I've got a project right there right now that we're going through them. So has there been a thought of having some consistency across the region, or maybe the southern ones, a little bit different from the northern ones? Councillor DePaul, you're bang on. The price of land is one of the biggest things, right? And obviously the land costs in the southern New York region versus northern New York region, have always been a little bit different, although they're creeping up all over the place. So I was coming across Stockport in the city of Markham in a development there where the developer offered up X number of homes at the city of Markham affordable price to Housing New York, and the comment in the staff report said Housing New York doesn't have the money to buy them. So as a developer and as a resident of New York region, I'll be honest, it bothered me, and I'm trying to understand the role of Housing New York. Is it supposed to be the same as Toronto City Housing Corporation, or is it different? Is it more advocacy? I think if we start at the 50,000 foot level and maybe, having the region take the reins and then work with the locals, whether it's consistent or a made in Richmond Hill plan and a made in Markham plan. But if you could maybe expand on that. Again, I apologize for not knowing the answers. Bill 23 did a lot with, waiving of DCs and CBCs and parkland. That goes a long way, but obviously it's not enough. If you look at construction costs, whether the building is rental or whether it's condominium, it's so much per square foot. And Councillor Paul, you're 100% right. When you do a condo, you go to market, you get deposits, you do deposit trust, you can draw against those deposits to get financing. When you do a rental, you don't rent them until the building is built, right? So the way the banks finance it is a totally different story. I really, really like your idea of potentially using maybe public funds if you're, some tweaks to provincial legislation to allow that, to at least break even. So maybe you could just comment on that, Sarah, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gabe. I had Mike Claire as the next speaker. I don't see him on the screen anymore. Okay, if he comes back, we'll have him. Is there anybody else? Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the excellent presentation. Forgive me if I missed this, but how, for example, is Peel funding their initiatives?
It's Peel and Durham were both property taxes, and they're okay going forward. City of Toronto had a similar program in place, but it was a good part of it was DC funded, so their program is on hold right now, from what I understand.
Thank you. So those two municipalities have allotted millions of dollars from property taxes to build affordable housing.
That's my understanding.
And even in 2020,
it's only all we have. It's property taxes or DCs.
Right. And I know this is really out there, and I'm not, this is probably maybe not a great question, but does the region have any authority to work with, for example, the Board of Education and look at properties all over the region, whether they're education, Catholic school, public school, whatever, and maybe start figuring out older neighbors. We could move those kids over here. We could have this piece of property. Like, I'm just thinking in terms of property in general. There are places where if you live in an older neighborhood, you can see where there might be some opportunity. Does the region have any authority in asking to work together with entities like Board of Education? Through you, Mr. Chair.
We can absolutely ask. I'm not as sure of the willingness. I know I get those emails, the provincial, excuse me, provincial releases, and I saw one. It's one of those situations of competing interests. The education sector is looking to maximize their value. And I saw an announcement go out that all school properties going forward would be at fair market value, not discounted. And of course, that works well on the education side. On the housing side, it's another bit of a brick wall for us. But absolutely, school sites, not unheard of. It's incredibly difficult to write policy for affordable housing because it's really so situational of what will work at any exact moment on any exact property. Part of the trick is making sure we have the flexibility to react to those sorts of things. I feel like I've said no, or I've been a tad negative a little bit today, and I do want to share something with everyone, and it's just my opinion. Addressing affordable housing challenges, it's all about incrementalism. Every little step counts. We had a counselor the last time we went to regional council, and they challenged us to come up with a BHAG for this plan, a big, hairy, audacious goal. To me, and others in the region will likely not agree with this, every single unit that gets provided out to the community is a BHAG, every one of them. We've changed the lives of people, their families, their social determinants of health, their potential outcomes. So just I just want to say yay for all of you. You are all doing great work, and I appreciate your input so much. It's life-changing work.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I went on a tangent.
That's okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, I really appreciate your passion for this. And I can see it's not just a job. You truly want to find solutions, as I think everyone here does. But when you tell me that, there's a cost problem, well, I know tax dollars built the schools, tax dollars built the boards, tax dollars did all of this. So I don't know what the approach is, but I'd be more than happy to meet with you and meet with our board, our YRDSB, why can't I think of it? Our members who are elected, board members. Trustees, right. I've myself met with the chair of the director of York Region Board of Education, like these silos of, okay, well, this is ours, that's yours, or that's not. It's all been paid for by the same people, it's the residents. So I would love to engage you further about figuring out ways to break down some of these walls, because it's absolutely past time, and there is no us and them anymore, because kids need a place to live and then go to school. So those are just my comments. I'd love to work with you or think of ways out of the box. And forgive me if my arrogance thinks you haven't already thought of it all. You probably have, but there's got to be a will and a way. So thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Silovitz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for giving me time to speak here. Good afternoon, everybody. I have a comment, not so much a question. And that is, it's very important for everybody to remember that we don't build housing. Neither does the region. Housing is built by the builders, by the land developers. And therein lies one of our biggest problems, right? So it's a very complicated matter. It's a very complicated issue. And purpose-built rentals are absolutely number one on our list, but they're not number one on the developers list. We do have some purpose-built rentals coming to Ward 5, that much I know, one on Hillcrest Mall property, and one that's coming to May and Young. But And I believe there's another one coming, hopefully to Young and 16th. But our development friends don't build a purpose-built rental in front of building condos, which are more valuable and more lucrative for them. So it's just something we need to, I think, Mr. Mayor, that we need to always keep that in mind. If we built the housing, or if York Region built the housing other than, of course, Housing York, I think that we would be in a different situation completely. But because we don't, and we are reliant on what is built by the private sector, we have a housing crisis. And that is going to continue no matter what. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to mention that because I think it's important.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else? I'll just make some brief comments. I thank you for your presentation, Sarah. It's obviously you live and breathe and everything, all of this all the time. And I think that's, it's really important to have people guiding these policies that we're going to be bringing forward if we're going to see any positive change. I was particularly interested in the whole discussion that we had about advocacy. And I think I agree with almost everything that's been said here today. And I think one of the things that I'm starting to see more and more as in my position as mayor is the frustration that we have as a municipality in seeing things get approved but not built. And I think this is a very problematic. And, I mean, recently we were, well, I'll call it penalized under the Building Faster Fund by not making our housing targets. And when I say penalized, I mean, other municipalities were able to achieve their goal. Richmond Hill did not. But, I think a lot of that, when I look at some of these other municipalities, and they've done good work, but they haven't done anything that we haven't done. In the situation that we find ourselves in with that Building Faster Fund is that the funding that's necessary, or that's offered in that fund is funding that we need as municipalities to do the things we need to do, facilitate growth. Not getting that funding is not helping us. And the problem is other municipalities are getting the funding, but for criteria that they're being measured on, which have to do with pouring foundations. Well, the city of Richmond Hill doesn't pour foundations, so we're not being measured on anything that we actually control. But I think that there's a lot of advocacy that's needed. Mr. DiMartino did mention there are a couple of things about Bill 23 that nibble around the edge as possible incentives for builders to get building, but they're clearly not working. And I would argue actually that I don't think that there are enough of a target with measurables attached to them that they would actually qualify as an effective incentive. So I think there's a lot of work that we need to be doing around advocacy. And I know I have certainly been doing a lot of that. I know the Ontario Big City Mayors have, OBCM and all of my colleagues have been saying the exact same thing, yet we don't seem to be getting the support that we need from the federal and provincial government to really move the needle in that big, hairy, audacious, or whatever it is, goal. Because I really do believe that that is the goal. We need to move the needle, and we need to move it much more quickly than we're moving it right now. We are not going to be able to do this on the back of the property tax base. Richmond Hill, I think in the next presentation, we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that have been done or in the city of Richmond Hill to help facilitate it, the building of housing. But, we've streamlined the process. We've done a lot of work with regard to the things that we actually do have jurisdiction over. But at the end of the day, we are not the ones that are typically actually building the structures that people live in, and we need incentives for builders to build, and they face lots and lots of pressures, especially right now, and they need incentives to do it because they're not going to do it unless they're going to be making a profit. There is nothing wrong with builders making a profit. That's the way business works in our society. So. Anyway, those would be my comments. I appreciate the work that the region's doing because it's coordinating a lot of the efforts across municipalities. And I think if, that is an important component of, attacking this problem. So with that being said, we have a motion on the floor that Kathleen Manaki moved to receive the presentation. All those in favor of that? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. So we'll move on. Thank you, Sarah, for your presentation and your work. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a presentation by Senior Planner Chun Chu. And this is a 15-minute presentation. So Chun, with that, I'll send it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could everyone hear me?
Yes, we're loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. If you don't mind, could you please move the slide 3 more over? Actually, to slide number 4, please. Great, thank you. So today I am going to talk about the city initiatives that we are undertaking to address housing and affordable housing in the city. The first item is the 4 center-specific official plan amendments. The city adopted 4 center-specific official plan amendments in late 2023 in the areas of Yonge and Carville, or 16th Avenue Key Development Area, the Village Local Center, the Newkirk Local Center, and the Oak Ridges Local Center. These OPAs, or official plan amendments, increased density and in some cases expanded land use permissions. They support development near transit, and they provide for a mix of uses to create complete communities. These OPAs are an update to the city's 2010 official plan, and they are a step towards as-of-right development in these important centers. The next step is to update the zoning bylaws so that they conform to these 4 OPAs. These 4 OPAs are currently being reviewed by York Region, who is the approval authority for Richmond Hill. Next slide, please. The Housing Accelerator Fund is a federal program launched by the CMHC. The city was awarded $31.1 million from the federal government in November last year to implement a number of housing initiatives. The HAF program, or HAF program, generally focuses on increasing the overall supply of housing in the city and having housing located near transit corridors, as well as achieving affordable housing. Since the HAF agreement is a confidential agreement with the federal government, more details will be forthcoming on these HAF initiatives. Next slide, please. As you recall, the city is developing a community improvement plan for affordable housing and sustainable design in Richmond Hill. We are working with 2 consultants who are Barry Lyon Consultants and ERA Consultancy. We're working with them to develop tools and incentives to encourage the development of affordable housing and sustainable buildings. This will likely be tied to the Housing Accelerator Fund, which I just spoke about earlier. We are targeting to bring forward the recommendations to Council in Q4 of this year in order to establish and implement the Community Improvement Plan next year. The consultants have drafted a background report for the CIP, or Community Improvement Plan, which looks at potential incentives offered under a CIP and under other tools, such as a municipal capital facility agreement. The consultants have also identified the potential financial gap that would need funding in order to facilitate the development of affordable housing. The financial gap for projects that include affordable housing range between $25,000 to $350,000 per affordable rental unit. The variation depends on the depth of affordability, the affordable period, and cost of land, as well as other factors. The city is reviewing this background study, and it will be made publicly available sometime in late spring or early summer. We did receive the background report earlier. However, due to the rapidly changing legislation that we're experiencing to date, some of that background report had to be revised. The city will also be consulting with stakeholders in early April. We will be seeking advice from the nonprofit housing providers and the for-profit housing sectors on what are the most effective incentives for affordable housing. We will also be consulting with the environmental groups to determine how the city can incentivize sustainable design. The city staff is in the process of creating a consultation plan. Next slide, please. The city is presently working on a peer review of the impact of inclusionary zoning on development feasibility in Richmond Hill. This is a requirement under Ontario Regulation 232-18 if the city wishes to pursue policies and bylaws regarding inclusionary zoning. The city has retained a consultant called Parcel Economics for this project. They have drafted a peer review of the 2021 report on inclusionary zoning. Following this, the consultant will also update the inclusionary zoning impact study to respond to changing market conditions and changing regulation on inclusionary zoning. As part of this update, the consultant will be consulting with stakeholders to confirm the methodology and assumptions behind the financial impact assessment. Lastly, the consultant will also update the 2021 housing needs assessment. And this is done to reflect the current supply and demand for housing. We anticipate that this project will be completed in the fall of this year. Ultimately, we are looking for a recommendation from the consultant on whether the city should implement inclusionary zoning and whether the goals identified in our 2021 affordable housing strategy remains valid today. Next slide, please. The last initiative I'd like to speak to is the Affordable Housing Learning Forum that the city is planning for in late April or early May. The purpose of this session is to help build internal capacity for the city and for our nonprofit housing providers. We want to use this engagement as an opportunity for city staff and nonprofit housing providers to learn from each other and to build partnerships. City Council is invited as observers to this event. In terms of format, it will be a 2-hour virtual webinar. A number of nonprofit housing providers in the region will be invited as part of a panel. We intend to invite a small but variety of nonprofit housing providers who represent the spectrum of housing providers in this sector. We want to hear from the panelists who their clients are, what types of housing do they provide, and how they go about growing their housing portfolio. In addition, city staff will present the current land use planning framework for affordable housing. The event will include a period for Q&A where city staff can ask questions directly to the nonprofit housing providers and vice versa. We will record the presentations and make them available for the committee members to view afterwards. Next slide, please. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you for your time. To wrap up, we recommend that the committee receive this presentation and refer all comments back to staff. The next committee meeting is September 10th at 1:30 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chun. I appreciate that. And so we'll get this opened up to the committee members here. If I could get somebody to kick us off and move the motion to receive the presentation. Who would like to do that? Okay, Regional Local Councillor DePaulo, do you have any comments as well?
I do, Mr. Mayor, and I'm happy to move the receipt of the presentation. Again, very informative and a lot lots to unpack there, and a lot of new information, a lot of good information, and it seems like Miss Chu, you've got a handle on maybe what's happening at other levels, and I'm really curious now. I'm like the mayor said, I'm hearing these announcements of incentives being given out to other municipalities, and I guess we're indirectly penalized and not getting rewarded these rewards. But how is that set? I mean, I agree with the mayor. There's nothing in our power, especially in such a short term, in a 2-year span of time. The amount of houses that are built in Richmond Hill really bear no direct relationship to the decisions we're making or anything that we're doing at the city. It's just a snapshot of a point in time of what's scheduled to be built, and because a lot of that stuff would have been approved 5 years ago. But what is the specific criteria? This is, it's embarrassing a little bit here, but it's news to me that the province has some interim goals that needed to be hit. I thought we had the 27,000 units by 2031. What are these interim targets, and how do these incentive dollar amounts work?
I see Director Flores ready to answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor DePaula. You raised really good points, and it's something we've been grappling with. We are actually bringing a staff report that discusses the very topic that you have raised in response to the member motion from last December. But to really just, I guess, keep it brief, the Building Faster Fund that you referred to rewards municipalities that have an assigned target. Ours was 27,000 by the year 2031. And based on our numbers, we are very likely to meet that within the next 7 years. It was supposed to be 10 years, but for whatever reason, it's actually just 7. Having said that, the Building Faster Fund is based on 2023, 2024, and 2025, and it's looking at CMHC housing starts. And that is measured by pouring of the foundation and ensuring that it is dry. That is how they count that unit. And if it is multi-residential, I understand they also wait until the first floor is up. So anything that appears in Richmond Hill that actually has that, you're right, would have been gone through the process and approved years ago. So essentially, if we did approve units in 2023, which we did, the pouring of those foundations wouldn't have taken place in 2023, and they're not likely to take place in the next 2 years, given the typical time lag, and also the fact that we are transitioning and moving to more multi-residential development, which takes even longer within that time gap. So that's part of the story. There are other factors related to that. And, if you look at the benchmarking, which we do address in the report that's coming up, we are one of many municipalities that did not meet that target. Certainly it's good news for those that have, but there's quite a variation, and one size does not fit all. One, we don't build housing, but two, we're all in different stages of growth and development. And there isn't really any one pattern. You can see that some of the smaller municipalities that achieve their targets because they happen to have a subdivision ready to go that probably was approved many years ago. And because they're such a small municipality, their target was very small, and so they were able to meet it. We are making progress, but one of the points that we are raising is the measure that is being used isn't indicative of the approvals and the effort that we've been investing in Richmond Hill. All of our policy and program initiatives, all of our streamlining and process improvements, it's not reflected in the number that they're using to measure for the funding.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Flores. I'll certainly look forward to that report and delving into this. And I'm definitely going to change approach if we've got these shorter term targets that we have to hit. And like the mayor said, I don't know how. I don't know how we increase the number of units in Richmond Hill a year from now. What we do here plays out in the real world in the next 5 to 7 years. And I think when it comes to our official plan, that is somewhat within our control. And the province also scaled us back on density that we requested of the region and was approved by the region. And we have to, it's not something that you or Ms. Chu can answer now, but, we've got to ask them, to scale back our targets if they're scaling back our densities. They removed the Gormley Go MTSA in this Get It Done Act, and all attempts that I've made to have it reinstated seem to have failed. And they do seem to be going forward to Get It Done Act that's reaffirming density they've taken away from us. So we've really, we've made decisions on Oak Ridges, and we've made decisions in the historic downtown, really limiting growth. So the remaining portions of our official plan, we're going to have to get really aggressive if we're going to create an environment where in the next 7 years we can hit these targets. And you see money going out to other municipalities. It drives home the importance of us. So what we need to do. So I'm really going to look forward to that report coming forward. It was that spurred by the member motion that I had, or is this a separate thing? Ms. Flores?
Yes, Councilor DePella, it is in response to the member motion from December that you brought forward.
Okay, so yeah, we'll adjust at a time. In terms of affordability, I think I've just sidetracked the committee a little here, and apologize again for that, Mr. Mayor. And after the meeting, I guess that's 2 separate incidences that I'll have to be hit with the wet noodle. Apologies.
That's fine. You have to accept that. Okay, thanks very much, Regional Local Councillor. Gabe DiMartino.
Thank you, Mayor West, and thank you, Chun, for that presentation. On the comment about meeting the targets, whether it's for-profit companies or the nonprofits deliver affordable or attainable housing, it's great that all the work the city's doing and from a policy level, but let's not forget, and this goes back to, I guess, comments recently of the regional planning commissioners, and I guess the build response is that without infrastructure aligned, units don't get built, whether they're market condos or whether they're affordable units or nonprofit units. If the pipes are not there, and again, and there's a money from the feds and the province, to the regions, there's the regional systems, and there's the constituent municipality systems for conveyance into the regional trunk. So I think as we move forward with all of these policy initiatives, the infrastructure, the growth plan, the PPS are pretty clear that infrastructure is supposed to be there to support growth, whether it's market growth or whether nonprofit growth. And again, I know that the region, every couple of years gives tranches of allocations. So there was a comment made earlier that there's units that were approved or started, whatnot. We can have all the plan approvals in the world, but if we can't flush a toilet, we can't get a building permit. So I don't want to lose sight of that. And obviously, Mayor West, you remember regional council and back to the advocacy efforts of the city and the region to the province, to get infrastructure money there as well. I don't want to lose sight of that. On the community improvement plan and affordable housing and sustainable design slide, Chun, I was part of the build committee that worked with Richmond Hill, Vaughan, Markham, and Brampton for the new sustainability metrics. So we were successful in getting the menu of the metrics available for anybody to use, whether it's for profit housing or nonprofit, much larger. But there's a cost with sustainable development, and I don't want members of this committee to lose sight of that, right? So sometimes the goals are mutually exclusive, right? You have to hit certain targets, and if you're in intensification areas, I know the city of Vaughan has done it. I don't know what the city of Richmond Hill's policy is. If you're on intensification areas, you have to score a silver, right? And I don't know whether that's something that right now excludes affordable housing, but if you want an incentive, that would be an incentive there as well. Is that some of those design can be waived, just like Bill 23 did, because when you look at the costing, and again, right, it's all about revenue costs, whether it's a for-profit like a Great West Life or a REIT that builds, we'll call it purpose-built housing, or whether it's the nonprofits, they're not supposed to make money, but the cost drain, right, is one of the biggest things in the market. And obviously, when you equate that against a rental rate that's supposed to be achieving, a certain the percentile of the affordability in the town and the region's goals, that's where you run into problems. So I thank you for listening to my comments.
Well said, Mr. DiMartino. Thank you. Cheryl Guinness. Oh, you're on mute, Cheryl.
My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, Chang, thank you so much for that presentation. I just want to step back a little bit. When our target was given to us for Richmond Hill, 27,000, right? I think it's 27,000 units. There was an evaluation done. Did we determine that we can meet this? How did we determine that we can meet it? Now that we're sitting here saying we didn't meet certain targets, I know there are environmental, economical, a lot of stuff that usually prevent us from meeting our target. But I just want to step back a little bit and assess if we did what we needed to do correctly.
Director Flores?
I'll speak to that. When the designated target was issued to us, we did submit a housing pledge, which committed to contributing to it. We were very careful to say that it is aspirational, but I actually think that, and as part of that pledge, there's 30 plus initiatives actually that are underway in the city, both process-wise to streamline, as well as policy and program initiatives. So this is something we've been doing now for the past almost year. But according to our numbers, and what's in the pipeline, we're trying to develop a system where we can have better data. So, it's not solidified, but at the same time, we are confident that by 2031, we can meet that target. We have enough land available. We have enough applications in the pipeline where we're monitoring and seeing that the volume is consistent with what we could approve over the next 7 years. So that in itself is a target that we are pretty sure we can meet. The difference is that the 3-year target that the province is using for the funding is a measure of something else, and that's where we're having more difficulty. It's measuring the outcomes of proposals that would have been in years ago, even during the lag or the times of COVID when things were a little bit on pause. So again, it's a little bit of I guess it's a snapshot in time, but it also is very random depending on what the situation was in each municipality.
And I think you say you are addressing this with the province, right?
We've raised these points over and over again. I know Mayor West and other council members have voiced this opinion, as well as other municipalities. Yeah, that's all I can say on that.
Just in a nutshell, what was the biggest hindrance you would say that caused you not to meet that target? The biggest hindrance? How would you say if you're looking at it? I know I'm simplifying it, but it's not simple. I just wanted to.
I think I would echo what a lot of the other municipalities are saying. If the target should be based on a measure that measures what we control directly. We don't control the pouring of foundations. Even the building permit, when a proposal goes to the building permit stage, we may have done all of the approvals, but there are, for whatever reason, proposals that will lag. And so that's not something in our control. And I'm not actually pointing fingers at the development industry. It just is the way it is. But if municipalities are going to be rewarded for their efforts, then they should be measured based on the efforts within that calendar year. And what we can control within our calendar year are the number of approvals that we can contemplate and process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, so Kathleen McAkee, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much, Chun, for a really excellent presentation. I'm still confused about the Housing Accelerator Fund. I'm sort of like, the second or third slide was this wonderful picture of Richmond Hill receiving this money. And I understand it says that it's for to increase housing supply and affordable housing and build climate resilient communities. So what is that? What is that? What does that mean? Because I heard later on that some part of this is confidential and that we don't know what this is about. So can I have some clarification on that, as much as you know?
Director Flores, would you like to take a shot at that?
Yes, it's not that we are, so an agreement was signed and a housing action plan was developed as part of that agreement. And I think what I can probably share is there are 9 initiatives stemming from that action plan. Some of them overlap with some of the things we are already doing. We are not at liberty to speak about the details at this time. I think eventually those will be communicated out, but we have to be very careful that we're not going against the provisions of that agreement. But certainly, I mean, you know, I'm probably stepping a little too far, but some of the things that Chun talked about fall in line with those types of objectives and initiatives. And there are a few other things in the pipeline that we're working on, but we will be communicating that eventually to the committee. Some of them are underway too, so it's too premature to release anything at this point because we haven't really thoroughly accessed what the milestones are just yet. And we're also even trying to staff up as well. It's really just a small group of us right now. We're trying to get a lot of that stuff going. So,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I just, this is an excellent presentation. Chun, thank you so much. And thank you, Director Flores, for all of the work that you're doing on this and for bringing this to our council. I would just, you know, again, I just like to just reiterate maybe one point, and actually Gabe DiMartino mentioned this, that infrastructure is really important as an incentive, frankly, to facilitate building anything. I mean, I like this analogy. If you can't flush the toilet, you're not building the house there. And that's really important to know. And, you know, in Richmond Hill, we do tend to have a pretty good amount of that type of fundamental infrastructure, although not everywhere. And I know in York Region, there are areas that are running very, very short on sewage capacity and so on. And for a number of reasons, which I won't go into at this point. But one of the pieces of infrastructure that, you know, we don't yet have, which would be very helpful, is the subway. You know, we've been working on that for a long time, and in Chun's presentation, we didn't really talk much about the TOC development at Yonge Street and Highway 7. I mean, the potential for a large number of residential units and other things to be built in that area is really significant. But, you know, I would hazard a guess to say, and this is a private decision for the landowners in that area, but chances are a lot of that development won't really start in earnest until the subway arrives. If you see what's happening in Vaughan right now, you know, they've had the subway arrive at the Vaughan Metropolitan Center for a number of years. And I mean, every time I go by that area on the 407, you know, there seems to be a new building popping up. And, you know, again, if we were at a point where the builders were starting to build in that particular area, I don't think we'd have any difficulty at all in meeting our targets. But that probably isn't going to happen until we get the subway, which, you know, we've been working on now for quite some time and waiting for it to be funded. And it's finally funded a couple of years ago. So that's also, you know, very important. But anyway, I don't want to belabor that. One thing I will say, and in total fairness, about the Building Faster Fund, which I didn't say up to this point, but it is, I think, an important detail, is according to what I understand from the ministry, whatever money is left over in the Building Faster Fund, and keeping in mind that half of the municipalities essentially did not meet their target, there will be an opportunity to apply for the rest of the funding, but the municipalities that have already received funding may also receive some of that funding as well. So there is still an opportunity for municipalities to gain that funding after the fact, but it remains to be seen how much will be left. So, okay, so I think that's it for comments, unless there's anything else. So we have a motion to receive the report and the presentation. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. And last but not least, we need a motion to adjourn. Anybody? Okay, Cheryl, that's great. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. To members of the committee, thank you so much for being here. We always appreciate your input and your expertise, frankly. And you know, we're all pulling on the same rope in the same direction. So we really appreciate the time that you spent with us. So thank you very much, everybody, and we will see you next time.